drums of Egypt echoed through the night. Hebrew slaves groaned under the weight of their burdens. The overseer's whip fell without mercy. But amidst the oppression, a child floated on the Nile's waters, unaware of his destiny. This child would become the liberator of his people. It is the story of slavery and redemption, of a God who defied an empire, of a man called to lead his people, of a nation forged in the wilderness. And of a promise that would transcend generations. The gods of Egypt could not stop him. The seas could not hinder him. The armies could not defeat him. For when God chooses to free his people, nothing can stand in his way.
God's people are not slaves.
How did a slave defy a pharaoh? How did a sea split in two? How did a nation walk 40 years in the wilderness and survive? This is not just an ancient tale. It is a warning, a message, and a revelation for all ages.
Let my people go.
The years passed, and the people of Israel multiplied in Egypt. What was once a refuge in the days of Joseph, son of Jacob, also called Israel, became a prison of oppression. A new Pharaoh arose, one who knew nothing of Joseph. One who gazed at the Hebrews with fear and declared,
They are too many. They are strong. If war breaks out, they might join our enemies and escape our grasp.
So Egypt made a decree to enslave Israel. The sons of Jacob, the descendants of Abraham, the people of the promise, now were prisoners of Egypt. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and Pharaoh's dread grew.
If they keep multiplying, we will lose control. End them.
A new edict was proclaimed, one that filled every Hebrew home with horror.
Every Hebrew boy born shall be cast into the Nile. Only the girl shall live.
But amid mourning and anguish, in a humble home of the tribe of Levi, a child was born, a child destined to alter history. One who would later be named Moses.
I cannot let them kill him. I must hide him, even if it costs me my life.
For 3 months, his mother concealed the child. Every cry, every sound was a risk of death. But the day came when she could hide him no longer. So she made a choice. She prepared a basket, sealed it with tar, and placed her son inside. It was then that Miriam, Moses' sister, whispered urgently,
Mother, what will you do?
I'll place his life in God's hands.
Basket floated on the Nile's waters, among reeds, among crocodiles, in the same river where Hebrew children had perished. But this child was untouched by death, for God had a purpose for him. And then, Pharaoh's daughter came to the river. She saw the basket among the reeds. When she opened it, the child cried, and her heart was moved.
This is a Hebrew child, but I will raise him as my own.
And so, the child destined to free Israel was raised in Egypt's palace, given royal education, trained as a prince. But in his heart, he was no Egyptian. He was a Hebrew. And one day he would discover this in the most painful way. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house, surrounded by gold and grandeur, taught the sciences of Egypt, schooled in the art of war. But though he dressed as a prince, his soul belonged to another people. Destiny called him. And the day of awakening came with searing pain. One day, Moses went to visit his people, the Hebrews. He walked among the slaves, their hands calloused, faces streaked with sweat and tears. And then he saw it, an Egyptian overseer, savagely whipping a Hebrew slave, again and again. No mercy. Moses felt fury burn within him.
I stepped forward. No one else was there. No witnesses. The overseer kept striking him again and again. And then I acted.
Moses raised his hand, and the Egyptian fell dead. A brief silence followed. The Hebrew slave fled. But Moses knew what he'd done. Moses knew his life would never be the same. He buried the body in sand and ran. The next day, as Moses tried to stop a fight between two Hebrews, one glared at him with scorn and spat.
Who made you our judge? Will you kill me, like you killed the Egyptian?
Fear gripped Moses. The news had spread. When it reached Pharaoh's ears, the king ordered his death. Moses fled the palace where he was raised, fled the people he was meant to free, fled aimlessly until he reached the land of Midian. And there, his life shifted. In Midian, Moses found refuge. Years passed. He married Zipporah, daughter of Jethro, priest of that land. For 40 years, he became a shepherd. The life of Egypt faded behind him. The mission of his youth faded into the desert sands. But God had not forgotten Moses. For one day, on God's mountain, fire called to him.
It was an ordinary day. I led the sheep along Mount Horeb's slope. Then I saw it, a bush, aflame with fire, yet not consumed.
Moses drew near, and suddenly, the fire spoke.
Moses, Moses.
Here I am.
Do not come closer. Remove your sandals, for the ground you stand on is holy ground.
Moses fell to his knees and hid his face, for he knew who spoke.
I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob.
Moses trembled, but God was not finished.
I've seen my people suffering in Egypt. I have heard their cries, and I have come to deliver them to a land flowing with milk and honey. Therefore, I send you to Pharaoh. You will bring my people out of Egypt.
Moses lifted his gaze. The fire still blazed. The voice echoed in his mind, but in his heart, fear paralyzed him.
Lord, who am I to go to Pharaoh? Who am I to lead Israel out?
I will be with you, and this is your sign. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain.
If they ask your name, what shall I tell them?
I am who I am. This is what you shall say to Israel. I am, has sent me to you?
Moses fell to his knees. He who had fled Egypt, he who had left everything behind, he who had no power or army, now bore an impossible mission. But he also held a promise. God would go with him, and Egypt would know the power of Israel's God. Moses descended from Mount Horeb. The fire still burned in his mind. The echo of God's voice still thundered in his heart. Yet the task God had given seemed unthinkable. He was but a shepherd, no leader, no speaker, no warrior. Now he must defy the mightiest king on earth.
Lord, I am not a man of words. Never have been. My tongue is slow. My speech faltering.
Who gave man his mouth? Who makes the mute speak, the blind see? Is it not I, the Lord? Go, I will be with you and teach you what to say.
Lord, send someone else.
Silence fell on the mountain, but God's resolve did not waver.
Aaron, your brother, will speak for you. Take this staff in your hand, for with it you will perform signs.
And so Moses left the wilderness and returned to Egypt. The man who had fled as a fugitive now came back as God's messenger. With Aaron, he stood before Israel's elders and told them all God had spoken. The elders believed. They bowed and worshipped, for they knew God had not forgotten them. Moses and Aaron entered Pharaoh's palace. The king's eyes burned with arrogance. The pillars of his throne were gold and ivory. Egypt was the mightiest empire on earth, and these two men were nothing before him. But Moses raised his staff and spoke with authority.
Now this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, declares. Let my people go, that they may worship me in the wilderness.
The hall fell silent, and then Pharaoh laughed.
Who is this Lord that I should obey his voice? I do not know your God, nor will I let Israel go.
Pharaoh turned to his overseers.
If they have time to speak of freedom, they are not working enough. From this day, we will no longer give them straw for bricks. Let them gather it themselves, but their quota remains unchanged. Fail, and they will be punished.
And so Israel's burden grew heavier. Hebrew overseers were whipped. The people despaired, and they turned against Moses.
I say, you promised us freedom. Now our suffering is worse.
Lord, why did you allow this? Since I spoke to Pharaoh, his cruelty has deepened, yet you still delay your deliverance.
Now you will see what I do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand, I will compel him to release my people. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. With outstretched arm, I will bring them out of Egypt, and Egypt will know I am the Lord.
God gave Moses signs and wonders, and Moses returned to Pharaoh's palace. But this time, he was not alone. He came with the power of Israel's God. Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh. Aaron declared boldly,
"That this is the Lord's command. Let my people go."
Pharaoh crossed his arms unmoved.
Aaron, throw down your staff.
Aaron cast his staff to the ground, and it became a serpent. Pharaoh's counselors recoiled, but Pharaoh smirked. He nodded to his sorcerers.
Is this all your God can do?
Egypt's magicians threw down their rods. and they too became serpents. Then Aaron's serpent devoured theirs. The priests trembled. Yet Pharaoh hardened his heart.
This is nothing but cheap sorcery. My answer stands. Israel will not go.
And so God's judgment fell upon Egypt, and no human power could stop it. Egypt defied God. Pharaoh hardened his heart. He refused to hear, refused to bow. Now, God would speak through judgment, not with words, but with signs. Signs Egypt would never forget.
First plague.
Moses and Aaron stood at the Nile's edge, the river of life, Egypt's pride. But now, it would become its ruin. Moses exclaimed,
This is the Lord's decree. Let my people go, or the Nile's waters will turn to blood.
Aaron raised his staff, struck the water, and the river turned crimson. Fish floated dead. Stench spread across the land. Egyptians scrambled for water, but every spring, well, and stream became blood.
This doesn't impress me? My magicians can do the same.
Pharaoh hardened his heart and refused to free Israel.
Second plague.
Then the Lord told Moses,
Stretch out your hand, and frogs will overrun the land.
Aaron lifted his staff. From rivers, ponds, and waters, frogs swarmed. They blanketed palaces, infested homes, leapt onto beds, crawled into food. Egypt became a writhing swamp. Pharaoh relented.
Plead with your God to remove the frogs, and I'll let your people go.
Moses prayed. The frogs died. Rotting carcasses choked the air. When Pharaoh saw relief, he hardened his heart and kept Israel enslaved.
Third plague.
Then the Lord commanded Moses,
Strike the dust, and it will become lice.
Aaron struck the ground. Dust surged like a black cloud. When it settled, billions of lice crawled over skin and beast. Egyptians scratched in agony. Priests tried to mimic the plague and failed. A magician trembled.
Thaikopyatita sar, wrote Kundalison, this is no trick, this is the finger of God.
But Pharaoh ignored him, and Egypt suffered.
Fourth plague.
Then came a dark haze, a deafening buzz. Swarms of flies blackened the sky. Thousands, millions, in eyes, in mouths, pestilence reigned. But in Goshen, where Israel dwelt, not a single fly stirred. A desperate Pharaoh begged Moses,
Go worship your God, but stay in Egypt.
Moses answered,
Number, we must go to the wilderness.
Go, but not too far.
Moses prayed, and the flies vanished. But Pharaoh broke his word and hardened his heart once more.
Fifth plague.
The Lord declared,
I'll strike Egypt's livestock with plague, but Israel's flocks will remain untouched.
The next day, Egypt's cattle fell dead. Oxen, sheep, horses. But in Goshen, no animal perished. Pharaoh surveyed the carnage. Yet still, he refused to free Israel, for his heart stayed hardened.
Sixth plague.
Moses and Aaron took furnace soot and tossed it into the air. The ash became festering boils on Egyptian flesh. Painful sores covered their bodies. Egypt's magicians could not even stand before Moses. But Pharaoh would not yield.
Seventh plague.
Moses raised his staff. The sky turned black. Wind roared, then fell. Hail and fire entwined. Storms crushed fields. Trees were torn from roots. Men and beasts died. Egypt had never seen such fury. Pharaoh cried in terror.
I have sinned again. Plead with your God to end this storm, and I will let you go.
Moses prayed. The hail ceased. But once more, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Skies darkened, not by clouds, but by locusts. Armies of insects devoured all that remained. Egyptians watched in horror. As the land vanished beneath a shroud of destruction, Pharaoh begged,
I have sinned. Plead for me, and I will release you.
Moses prayed. Winds swept the locusts away, but Pharaoh broke his oath.
Ninth plague.
Moses stretched his hand, and Egypt was swallowed by darkness. 3 days of total blackness, no sun, no flame. But in Goshen, Israel's children had light. Pharaoh rasped weakly.
Go, but leave your livestock.
No, we take everything with us.
Get out of my sight. If you see my face again, you die.
So be it. I will never see your face again.
10th and last plague.
The final night arrived. Death drew near, and all Egypt would weep. Egypt knelt broken. Plagues had ravaged the land. Fields lay scorched, livestock dead, people drowned in despair. Yet one judgment remained. Egypt's darkest night was coming. God spoke to Moses.
I will bring one last plague upon Egypt. After it, Pharaoh will drive you out. At midnight, I will pass through Egypt. Every firstborn son will die, from Pharaoh's heir to the slave's child. But in Israel, I will make a distinction.
First Easter.
God instructed his people. That night would be the first Passover. Moses exclaimed,
Each family took an unblemished lamb, sacrificed it with its blood, marked our doorposts and lintels, for judgment would come, but the blood would shield us.
The Hebrews ate hastily, sandals on feet, staffs in hand, ready to depart, ready for freedom's call. Night fell, and in the darkness, the angel of death descended. Then it happened. At midnight, Egypt awoke to screams of horror. Pharaoh's firstborn, dead. The slave's firstborn, dead. The cattle's firstborn, dead. No Egyptian home was spared. Wails rose to the heavens. God's judgment had struck. Pharaoh, with a broken voice, almost in a whisper, said,
Go. Leave my people at once. Go worship your God, as you demanded. Take your flocks. Take all you own. But leave and pray for me too.
And so, after 430 years in Egypt, the children of Israel were free, the chains of slavery shattered. For God had heard their cries, and Egypt would never be the same. The final night in Egypt had passed. Israel, once slaves, marched as a free nation. Men, women, children. From the youngest to the eldest, from the strongest to the frail. They carried their belongings, their flocks, and the gold and silver Egypt had given them. For Egypt wanted them gone. Egypt wanted to forget. Egypt feared Israel's God. But the story was not over. Judgment had fallen. But the final battle still loomed. God did not leave them alone. By day, a pillar of cloud guided their path. By night, a pillar of fire lit their way. Moses led them forward. God's promise awaited. But their enemy was not finished.
What have we done? We let the Hebrews go. We must bring them back.
Pharaoh rallied his army. 600 elite chariots, thousands of soldiers, Egypt's most feared horsemen. With fury burning in his heart, he pursued Israel. Israel marched on. Children laughed, elders smiled. But suddenly, screams erupted. From the rear, panic spread. Israel was trapped. Before them, the Red Sea. Behind them, Pharaoh's army. Freedom seemed a mirage. The desert offered no escape. Fear clouded their hearts. Terror gripped their minds. But Moses did not waver. For Moses knew what they did not.
Moses, did you bring us here to die? Were there no graves in Egypto?
Fear clouded their hearts. Terror gripped their minds. But Moses did not waver, for Moses knew what they did not.
Do not fear. Stand firm and witness the Lord's deliverance. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you need only be still.
God spoke to Moses.
Lift your staff, stretch your hand over the sea, divide it, that Israel may cross on dry ground.
Moses raised his staff, and the wind roared, fierce, relentless, unstoppable. The waters split in two. To the right, a wall of water. To the left, another wall, and between them, a path to freedom. Israel stared in awe, one by one. They stepped forward. The ground was dry, the sea tamed by God's power. Children ran, elders wept as they walked. God's glory enveloped them. But the Egyptians were not done.
After them. Catch them. Drag them back.
Egypt's chariots charged into the sea. Wheels clogged with mud. Horses stumbled. Panic surged among soldiers.
The Lord fights for Israel. Retreat.
But it was too late. God spoke to Moses.
Moses, stretch your hand over the sea. Let the waters return, and swallow Egypt whole.
I stretched out my hand. The winds shifted, the waters raged, and the sea crashed back into place.
The mightiest army in the world was swallowed by the sea. Chariots vanished, horsemen dragged beneath the waves. Pharaoh watched his power drown before his eyes, and Israel stood upon the shore. The enemies they had feared were corpses floating in the water. Israel witnessed God's work, and in that moment, they believed and raised their voices in praise.
I will sing to the Lord. For he has triumphed gloriously. He cast horse and rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation.
Women danced, elders wept for joy. For on that day, Israel ceased to be slaves. On that day, Egypt was defeated. On that day, God's glory blazed before all nations. Israel crossed the sea. Egypt faded behind. But freedom was more than escape. God had not brought them out of Egypt just to be free. He brought them out to be his people. Yet before entering the promised land, they would receive his law. And at Mount Sinai, God would call them to an eternal covenant. 3 months after leaving Egypt, Israel reached the Sinai wilderness. They camped at the mountain's base, and God spoke to Moses.
Come up to me, Moses. Tell Israel these words. You saw what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings. If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, a holy nation.
Moses obeys.
I went down and gathered the people. I told them all the Lord had said. And with one voice they answered,
We will do all the Lord has spoken.
On the 3rd day, Mount Sinai quaked. Thunder split the sky, lightning flashed, a thick cloud shrouded the peak, and the blast of a heavenly trumpet shook the air. Israel trembled. Elders fell to their knees, children hid in their mothers' arms. The Lord had descended in fire. Smoke engulfed the mountain, and God's voice boomed like a roar that shook the earth.
I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall make no idols, nor bow to them. You shall not misuse my name. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not lie. You shall not covet what belongs to your neighbor.
People heard God's voice. Their hearts quaked. In terror, they retreated from the mountain. Then the Israelites pleaded,
Moses, you speak to God and tell us what he says. But let God not speak to us directly, or we will die.
Do not fear. God has come to test you, so that his fear may dwell in you, and you may not sin.
Thus, God gave his law to Israel, a sacred covenant, a covenant to make them his holy people. But the people's hearts were not ready for obedience. And while Moses lingered on the mountain, Israel would face their first great trial. Moses ascended the mountain for 40 days and nights. God gave him the tablets of the law, inscribed with his own finger. But in the camp, the people's faith unraveled.
And Moses is gone. Who will lead us now?
Aaron answered them unsurely.
What do you want me to do?
Make us a god to lead us. For we don't know what's become of Moses.
Aaron gathered the people's gold and forged a golden calf.
And this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt.
Israel ran wild. They danced, feasted, bowed to the calf. But on the mountain, God saw it all.
Go down, Moses. Your people have sinned. They've turned aside. Let me destroy them, and I will make of you a great nation.
Lord. If you destroy them, the nations will say you freed them only to kill them in the desert. Forgive them. Do not wipe them out.
God heard Moses' plea, but Israel's sin would not go unpunished. Moses descended the mountain. What he saw filled his heart with rage. The people danced around the idol, bowed to the calf. They had forgotten their God.
Israel! Did the Lord not free you from Egypt? Did you not hear his voice on the mountain? Why have you fallen so quickly?
Moses raised the stone tablets and shattered them at the mountain's base. He seized the golden calf, melted it in fire, ground it to dust, mixed it with water, and made the people drink. Moses exclaimed,
"Whoever stands with the Lord, come to me."
The sons of Levi rallied to Moses, and God's judgment fell on the idolaters. That day, 3,000 men died, and the people's hearts were broken. Moses climbed the mountain again, and once more, he pleaded for his people.
Lord, I have found favor in your eyes. Let me see your glory.
I will cause my goodness to pass before you, but my face no one can see and live.
God renewed his covenant, gave Moses new stone tablets, and his glory blazed upon the mountain. From that day, Israel was no longer just freed slaves. They were a holy nation, a people set apart for God. But their journey was far from over. Before entering the Promised Land, they would face their greatest trial yet. Israel had received the law. They'd seen Sinai cloaked in fire, heard the voice of the living God. But God did not call them just to give commands. He wanted to dwell among them. And so, he ordered his earthly sanctuary built.
Tell Israel to build me a tabernacle, that I may dwell in their midst. Make it exactly as I show you: gold, silver, bronze, fine linen and purple, acacia wood, and precious stones. For my glory will fill this place.
Moses gathered the people. Israel brought their offerings. Artisans were filled with divine skill. Curtains were woven, the ark crafted, the lampstand forged, the altar consecrated. When the tabernacle stood complete, God descended upon it. A cloud covered the sanctuary, and the Lord's glory filled it so fully, not even Moses could enter. By day, the cloud shielded the camp. By night, fire lit Israel's way. When the cloud lifted, the people marched. God led them. God was with them. But though God dwelled among them, Israel's hearts remained rebellious, and their truest test was about to begin. The people marched from Sinai. The promised land was near, but the path ahead would test their faith. For though God had brought Israel out of Egypt, Egypt still lived in them, and soon their unbelief would bring judgment. They'd barely journeyed into the wilderness when some began to grumble.
We have no water. Did Moses bring us here to die of thirst?
Moses cried out to God. God made water flow from the rock, but soon after,
We have no food. In Egypt we had bread and meat.
God sent manna from heaven. Each morning, bread covered the ground like dew, and each night, quail filled the camp to feed them. Yet the people remained unsatisfied. They kept grumbling, kept rebelling, until the day their unbelief condemned them. Israel reached the edge of the Promised Land. one step from entering, one step from claiming God's promise. Moses sent 12 spies to scout the land. For 40 days, they traversed Canaan. When they returned, they carried the land's fruit, but also Defesh, they brought fear.
The land is good, but its people are giants, cities fortified, walls impossible to breach.
We can't conquer it. We'll be devoured.
The people listened, and fear consumed their hearts. That very night, Israel rebelled against God.
Let's return to Egypt. We will not enter this land.
Then Joshua and Caleb declared,
Do not fear. If the Lord delights in us, he will give us this land. Do not rebel against him.
But the people threatened to stone them. At that moment, God's glory descended.
How long will this people despise me? They've seen my glory. They've seen my signs. Yet still, they do not trust. Therefore, I swear, you will not enter the land. Your generation will perish in the wilderness. Your children will inherit it, but you will wander 40 years.
Moses fell to his knees. The people wailed in despair. But judgment had been spoken. They would never enter the promised land. Yet rebellion was not over. In the wilderness, a man named Korah rose against Moses. Korah and 250 men challenged his authority.
Moses, who made you our ruler? We are all holy. Why exalt yourself above God's people?
Moses fell face down, and God spoke judgment.
Tomorrow, the Lord will show who is his.
The next day, Korah and his followers stood before the tabernacle. The crowd gathered, and Moses spoke.
If these men die as all men do, the Lord has not sent me. But if the earth opens and swallows them alive, then know they have defied the Lord.
In that instant, the ground split, the earth cracked open. Korah and his followers were swallowed alive. The people fled in terror. That day, Israel learned God tolerates no rebellion. Years passed, 40 years in total. Israel wandered the wilderness. One generation died, another grew under God's provision. Egypt's slavery was now a distant memory. The people stood at the promised land's threshold. But before crossing the Jordan, they needed final instruction. Moses had one last lesson for his people. Israel assembled. Thousands gathered before Moses, faces eager, hearts pounding. Then, Moses spoke.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words I command you today must be on your hearts. Teach them to your children. Speak them in your home. When you lie down and rise up, bind them on your hands. Write them on your foreheads. For the Lord is your God. There is no other.
The people listened in silence, for Moses was not just speaking, he was
When
warning.
you enter the land, do not forget the Lord. Do not bow to Canaan's gods. Do not break the covenant. If you forget the Lord, if you rebel against his law, curse will follow you. But if you keep his commands, you will be blessed above all nations. You will live in houses you did not build, harvest vines you did not plant, and the Lord will fight for you, for he is your God, and you are his people.
Moses gazed at the people, the faces of the children, the eyes of the elders, the hearts of the youth, and he knew his time had ended, for God had told him,
You will not cross the Jordan. You will not enter the land. Climb Mount Nebo. See the land from afar. But you will not enter it.
Moses had led Israel for 40 years. He had witnessed God's power. He had spoken with him face to face. But now, he must pass leadership to another. God chose a new leader, one who would lead Israel into battle, one who would conquer the promised land. His name was Joshua. Moses called Joshua before the people. Placing his hands on him, he declared,
Be strong and courageous, for you will lead Israel into the promised land. The Lord will go before you. He will not fail you. He will not forsake you. Do not fear and do not falter.
Joshua bowed his head. The people watched in silence. Israel had a new leader. Moses must climb the mountain, never to return. Moses walked alone, ascended Mount Nebo. Wind whipped the summit. From there, he saw the promised land, Jordan River, Jericho's fields, Canaan's hills, the land God swore to Abraham. Moses beheld it, but did not cross, for his journey was complete. Moses breathed deeply, his eyes fixed on the horizon. And then, God called him home, in the mountain's solitude, in the presence of the Most High. Moses closed his eyes, and there, atop Mount Nebo, Moses died. No funeral, no mourning, for God himself buried him in an unknown valley. To this day, no one knows his grave. Israel wept for Moses. For 30 days, they grieved. But then, Joshua rose, took up his sword, looked toward the promised land, and God spoke.
My servant Moses is dead. Now, arise, cross the Jordan. For the land I promised your fathers, I now give to you. Be strong and courageous, for as I was with Moses, I will be with you.
Thus ended Moses' life. He did not enter the land, but left an eternal legacy. For the law God gave him lived on, and his name was never forgotten, for never again did Israel have a prophet like Moses, one whom God knew face to face. If you've made it this far, thank you sincerely for joining us on this incredible journey through the book of Exodus. This project has been a monumental challenge. Months of effort, dedication, and resources were poured into bringing this story to life as faithfully and epically as possible. But every second was worth it. For this isn't just Moses' story. It's the story of God's people. A story of faith, liberation, and redemption that still speaks to us today. Now we need your support. If this film has inspired or moved you, please share it. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, because this isn't the end. Israel's story continues, and soon we'll release Joshua, the Promised Land, the next chapter, where you'll witness the conquest of Canaan, the fall of Jericho's walls, and the fulfillment of God's oath. Don't miss it. Before you go, in a few seconds, 2 recommended videos will appear on screen. If you want to explore one of the Bible's most gripping stories, watch Esther, Queen of Destiny, a tale of courage, faith, and divine providence. And if you love this film, you'll be captivated by Daniel, Visions of the End, where a prophet defies empires and unveils mysteries of the last days. Both come highly recommended. Choose one and keep uncovering the wonders of God's Word with us. See you in the next video. God bless you. Amen.